Coming up, I've got a list of often forgotten preps. Make sure you have these before it's too late. Hey guys, it's Jara with Wicked Prepared. Welcome back everyone. Here at Wicked Prepared, we aim to help you be better prepared for anything that may come your way, from a minor personal emergency to a full-blown global SHTF scenario. One thing we're known for here is our prepper pantry hauls. Once or twice a month, I show our viewers everything that we've added to our food storage and our supplies. And it never fails that we get at least a few comments from viewers saying, thank you. You reminded me of things that I hadn't thought of, which is always nice because it's always a good feeling knowing that you helped someone out and gave someone something of value. So in that spirit, today I'm going to go over some of the things that I see over and over that a lot of people maybe just don't think about. But these things could prove to be very vital in an emergency situation. The first category I've got here, I'm calling pest control. This includes everything from rodents to bugs, pantry pests to garden pests, and everything in between. First, pantry pests. You've worked hard to build your emergency food supply, and if there ever comes a time that you have to rely on it solely, you want to make sure that you're not going to have things like mice and weevils that will get into your food and consume and contaminate it. Keep a good supply of things like fly swatters and mouse traps. I buy all kinds of these simple mouse traps because they're very inexpensive and they work very well. I think it's a good practice to keep a mouse trap set at all times in your food storage areas, even if you don't have mice. If they do get in, they can cause quite a bit of damage before you even realize they're there. If you keep a mouse trap set, check it daily, you'll know if they come in because you'll catch one in your trap. For fly swatters, you can get these basic fly swatters like a dime a dozen. I really like this one here. I found this at Walmart. This is it's retractable and expandable, so you can have just a short little thing and then you pull the handle out when you want it to go long. Of course, things like fly tape like this. Lots of different things that are not poisonous and they don't rely on electricity or anything like that. We don't use poisons because they can harm other animals that we don't necessarily want to harm. For bugs, one thing I think everyone should have is diatomaceous earth. Make sure you get the food grade. This can be used in the pantry as well as the garden. It can be mixed right in with dry goods you're storing like rice and pasta. And it even has internal uses in humans and animals. Don't forget about things for garden pests as well. Growing your own food will be vital in any long-term scenario, but if you've ever done any gardening, you know how detrimental garden pests can be to your harvest. Once again, not a good thing if you're relying on that food to feed your family. Keep a good supply of the things you use in the garden, like diatomaceous earth, BT, neem oil. Once again, we try to use things that won't harm the bugs that we're not trying to harm. There's lots of other things you can keep on hand for bugs, like cayenne pepper, cinnamon, bay leaves, citrus oil, castile soap, and borax, to name a few. This is not an exhaustive list. There's some things like cockroaches that I don't know much about because we don't even have to deal with those here in Maine. But just think about the things that you may have to deal with and make sure that you have a good supply of whatever you might need. Don't forget about pests on your pets and yourself. Keep extra flea and tick medicines for the fur babies and DEET repellent for yourself. No one wants to get things like Lyme disease or yellow fever, especially if medical care isn't available. And speaking of medical care not being available, take a serious look at your first aid and medical supplies. There's a few specific areas that many people fall short. Most folks have some kind of a first aid kit, some Band-Aids, some over-the-counter medications, maybe some gauze, bandages, and tape, but a lot of people grossly underestimate what they should store for wound care and bandaging. And we're not talking about Band-Aids here. If you get a wound, especially a serious one, keeping it clean, covered, and protected is going to be key, both for healing and for preventing infection that could mean serious trouble in a situation where medical care is lacking or completely unavailable. This box here is just a representation, but I buy sterile gauze rolls by the case, plenty of antiseptic, tape, gauze pads, everything. Most people can stand to bulk up in this area. Even in the first aid kits that we bring with us places. I remember a few years back we were camping. My son was coming down a hill on his bike after swimming, so he didn't have a shirt on. He dumped his bike in a ditch and he really tore up his whole torso area. I found out the hard way that I was really lacking in the amount of bandaging supplies that we carried in our first aid kit, so I've since added a lot more. The other item that many people are missing in their medical supplies is antibiotics. Most people have a good amount of over-the-counter medications, but the vast majority of those are symptom relievers. They don't actually cure anything. They just make you more comfortable, while time and your body's own immune system actually do the healing. But there are times when your body might need a little help, and especially in times when cleanliness and hygiene may be lacking, something simple like an infected wound or a UTI could become deadly without treatment. So having an emergency supply of antibiotics in your arsenal could be the difference between life and death. In the past, preppers resorted to fish antibiotics to build that supply. They've recently clamped down on that, so you really can't even use that anymore. But fortunately, we now have companies that can legally provide an emergency supply of human antibiotics. Companies like Chase, which is where we've gotten ours, they work with you to build a personal supply tailored to your needs. Don't forget, once it's been a year since you got your case, you're eligible to get another one. In fact, we actually got an email when we were eligible to order another case, because if you store these meds properly, they can last many, many years. And if we find ourselves in a long-term situation, we may very well need more than one round of these meds. I believe now they're actually also able, under certain circumstances, to give people a second supply if they have a secondary location that they'd like to keep some, like a workplace. So check them out, see what they have to offer. I'm going to put our link down in the video description for anyone who wants to check it out. It even comes with a little booklet that shows you, what every medication is used for and how to use it to make sure that you know what you're doing if you don't have the guidance of a doctor. But there's also times when you might be able to reach your doctor by phone or, by telemedicine or something like that, but you just don't have access to the medications. And then they can tell you what to take and you have what you need to take. This could be cases like traveling or like adventuring, really bad storms and things like that when you can't get out and emergency services are not coming out. There's lots of situations where you might be able to get guidance from your doctor, but you wouldn't be able to get the actual medications. Also shortages. I mean, that's something that we've actually already been experiencing. I know that I have a nephew who has not been able to get his medication because there's shortages of it. Now, it's not a life-saving medication, fortunately, but it just kind of really serves as a stark reminder that that's something that we could face. Get to know your herbal medicinals as well. There's a lot to know, so like any other skill, you need to study it. Get yourself some good books for reference, but don't expect to learn everything on demand from a book. But having both traditional antibiotics as well as more natural options is important. Just like with everything else, you want to come at it from multiple angles. In case one method fails you, one method runs out, or what have you. Never put all your eggs in one basket is very pertinent advice when it comes to prepping. Canning supplies. Even if you're not a canner, it can be an important part of preparedness. Why? Well, what if your power goes out? Maybe you don't have a generator. Maybe you do have a generator, but you just run out of fuel and you can't get any more. Either way, you only have so many hours before you lose everything in your freezer. If you grab your canner, some jars, and a propane burner, you can save some or all of it. What if we find ourselves in a long-term situation where food is scarce or unavailable from the grocery store, and we have no power? Growing, hunting, and gathering food will be a necessity. But anytime that you get more than you can eat in a day or two, you're going to need to preserve some of it so it doesn't go to waste. So get yourself a few cases of canning jars and some basic canning supplies. A basic bare bones canner is under $100 and perfectly acceptable. That's what I use. Get yourself a basic canning book, so if you've never done it, you'll have some instruction. Understand that you can water bath anything. There are people out there who water bath everything, including meat, and they're doing just fine. You don't have to follow this philosophy now, but if push comes to shove, it may be easier to use a water bath canner over a wood fire than a pressure canner. So it's just good to have that understanding and the timetables. Footwear. In an emergency, there will be work to be done, and you'll want to have proper footwear to protect your feet. They may not be readily available to purchase in an emergency, so if work boots are something that you normally wear, purchase a pair or two ahead for when they break down. And if it's not something that you typically use, have at least one pair of footwear available that will stand up to hard work. Likewise, have a good supply of socks, like these that I've used underneath here to avoid dirty boots on the counter. Socks are so important and they will break down over time. You'll always use them, so store a good amount ahead. Also, don't forget to keep a good pair of hiking or walking shoes in your vehicle, along with a couple extra pairs of socks. Especially if you're like me and you're usually wearing flip-flops or heeled shoes, this will be a lifesaver if you break down or become stranded and have to walk to rescue or walk home. Speaking of breaking down, another thing many people don't think about is alternative transportation. If something like an EMP or CME leaves many vehicles inoperational and roadways clogged with such vehicles, or if shortages and supply chain breakdown leave fuel unavailable. Having something like a bicycle could save a lot of walking. An e-bike in combination with a solar power station could be even more useful, especially if both could be protected from an EMP type of event. A trailer to haul behind said bicycle can make it possible to carry firewood, supplies, or scavenged goods from place to place. If you live in a climate with snow, a sled for hauling things could also come in handy. Tools and building materials. Storms and other natural disasters can leave a lot of damage in their wake. Having basic tools that don't require power to function, as well as some basic materials, some heavy plastic, duct tape, fasteners, and a few sheets of plywood, can be used for temporary repairs when needed. And if looting and disorder follows the initial event, these same materials can serve to help fortify and protect your home and property. Power tools can be helpful for short-term situations as long as you have extra batteries and keep everything charged. Even better if you have a solar power station for recharging them. And don't forget spare parts. The last thing we want is to have our emergency equipment fail us when we need it most. Make sure you have things like filters and spark plugs for your generator, extra heavy-duty extension cords, extra cables and adapters for solar generators, any parts that you may need to maintain or repair things. Even parts for things like your vehicle or your lawnmower, things like that. Even though you may not use these things in a serious emergency situation, we've definitely seen over the last few years how even a minor emergency can upset the supply chain and make these parts difficult or even impossible to find. So having as many backups as possible is a good idea. Don't forget the importance of basic safety items like fire extinguishers, as well as smoke and carbon monoxide detectors. These items should always be in your home, but we always keep extra in our emergency gear as well. Make sure any detectors you use have battery backups. In an emergency, big or small, you may be using alternative fuels and appliances, and far too often we see people succumb to carbon monoxide poisoning from things that are misused or malfunction. You can also get an air quality monitor that monitors for gas leaks and low oxygen levels. Anytime that you burn anything, it consumes oxygen. So if you're in a very tightly sealed environment, it can become a problem. And have fire extinguishers, large ones, and make sure they're fully charged up and not expired. If a fire starts during a hurricane or other serious event, often emergency services are not coming out, or if they are, they're woefully overtaxed. Fire extinguishers could save your home or at least buy you enough time to save your family. Pets. Don't forget to prep for your pets just like the rest of your family. They'll need to eat just like the rest of us. Dry cat and dog food doesn't store very well. It goes rancid pretty quickly, but we do try to keep at least a few months of dry food on hand. But just like with our food, cans is really the way to go for dog and cat food. So we really stock up on the cans. If you learn to make your own pet food, you can can it or even better, freeze dry it. So far, I've made food for our chickens and ducks and cats. And I'm researching how to make food for our dogs. If you learn how to make food for your animals, you have to learn about their nutritional needs, and having that understanding makes you better able to meet those needs in any given situation. But it's not just about food. Make sure that you have a first aid kit for your pets. I'll have videos coming up on that. And have some kind of go bags or evacuation supplies ready for your pets, just like for yourselves. And a plan for if such a situation arises. And that brings me to the final item today that many people don't think about. A plan. Talk to your family, plan with your family. Make sure they know how to use things like those fire extinguishers. Make sure they know where things are stored in case you're not around when disaster strikes and another family member has to find the flashlights and start setting up other gear. Set up contact people outside your local area in the event of a localized disaster. Talk about what family members should do if something happens when not everyone is home. What if people are at work, at school, or elsewhere when an EMP or large-scale natural or man-made disaster occurs and wipes out both transportation and communication? Talk to family members about what they might do in a situation like that. Stay put, head toward home or a designated meeting area, which route to take if possible, and plan a system for leaving messages for one another. It's impossible to really completely plan for situations like this because there's so many unknown variables. But if you've at least discussed the possibilities as a family, it can at least cut down on some of the chaos and unknown. It's also a good idea to get in the habit of making sure that everyone knows where everyone else is at any given time. If I have to run out for errands, I make sure to let Mr. Wicked Prepared know where I'm going and what route I'm taking. If something happens, just to me or to the world in general, he knows where to start looking. Whether you've been stocking up for years or you're completely brand new to this idea, it's always a good idea to make a list of what you have, what you need, and what you can work towards having in the future. You don't have to do this all at once. You can add to your inventory bit by bit as you can afford to. but it does need to be a priority in your life if you want to be ready for whatever comes your way. I don't think I could ever make a video long enough to include everything you may need. And at the end of the day, you need to decide what supplies and gear you need based on where you live, how many people are in your family, and if you have any special health requirements. There are many variables. But along with the things I mentioned in this video, it is important to remember items like a good variety of freeze-dried food, which lasts 25 years. It's important to be stocked up on water and also to have various ways to filter and purify water. As I mentioned, solar generators and power stations can come in very handy. An EMP shield device can prevent your home and your vehicles from being damaged by an electromagnetic pulse, but also simple Faraday cages can be used to protect smaller items like radios. Be sure to have stoves for cooking and for heat and extra fuel. Have books on hand that contain the information that we're so accustomed to finding on the internet these days. I mentioned gardening earlier. You definitely want to remember to keep a supply of vegetable seeds on hand and rotate through them accordingly. Thinking about events coming down the road and thinking about what could happen will help you get the gear you need right now. Equipment like a gas mask with extra filters could save your life someday. And we won't get into this on YouTube, but devices that provide personal protection and security are always very good to have at the ready, if you know what I mean. I've provided links in the description below to the products that we have and that we trust and some that we use in our home every day on a regular basis. If you see something in this video that looks interesting to you, definitely check for a link down in the description. But if you don't see something listed or if you'd like my input on other items, feel free to leave a comment below and we can chat about it. These lists aren't meant to overwhelm you, but rather to allow you to plan. There is a lot to worry about in this world, but there's only so much that you or I can control. The best thing we can do right now is to be ready. Okay guys, that is my list for today of preps you may have forgotten. How did you do? Do you have most of these items already planned for in your preps? Leave a comment down below with some of your own ideas. What preps do you often see people forget to plan for? I'm sure there will be another episode like this one because there are a lot of things to remember when it comes to being not just prepared, but wicked prepared. I hope this video was helpful to some of you. If you found value in this, don't forget to give it a like down below and make sure you're subscribed to the channel so you don't miss any of our content. We just hit 40,000 subscribers, so thank you to everyone who has subscribed and watched our videos and left comments. We really have some of the best viewers. Okay, enough sappiness for today, guys. If you made it all the way to the end of the video, leave me a checkmark emoji down in the comments for all the things you checked off your list today. And check out this playlist up here that is totally binge-worthy. I'm Jara with Wicked Prepared. Survive today, thrive tomorrow. We'll see you next time.